just love talking to people and learning from other people, and I think that's what attracted people to our podcast. There's a common saying that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and why is this common? This is a normal saying in society at the moment, but why have we taken this as the norm? And that's kind of where I start. We were on the podcast and we were like, we always talk about America are doing this, America are doing that, it looks amazing over there with the adoption and maybe what's happening in Texas and Wyoming, and we were like, why is nothing happening here? So on that podcast, we were like, okay, why don't we run a conference? And I was like, oh wow, this is going to be plain sailing. And it's going to be easy. Nope. Very different. Yeah, it was, it all happened so fast. It's a bit of a blur.
Hey Jordan, how's it going?
Good, mate. Very good. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. How does it feel to have the UK's biggest Bitcoin conference?
It's quite surreal to get to this point. Looking at how fast it's happened as well, to put on the UK's first major Bitcoin conference last year. It feels good, and it's just a lot to live up to now.
Yeah, I guess you got to kind of do it again, do it bigger, get the speakers again, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So it's we've set the bar pretty high, and now it's how do we smash that and set a new bar even higher, which is the exciting part. That's what I love.
I mean, how did this all come about then? Because I know you had a podcast before, but did you have like any prior sort of events experience, or do you feel like this is kind of something that anyone kind of listening, if they also wanted to hold an event or a Bitcoin event somewhere else in the UK or another country, do you think this is kind of something anyone else could do? And yeah, well, what was kind of talk me through that a little bit?
Yeah, no worries. I'll take you back to March 2020 is when it all kicked off. Obviously, because we had the COVID pandemic. That's around that time that it happened. So I'd been interested in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin since 2017. And I'd just been like dabbling in it, not actually researching it, just seeing it as this investment. And it's a way to make money, a way to make quick money. How very wrong it was.
I mean, to be fair, getting in March 2020 though, that would have been like the low almost, or like not necessarily the main low, but just before, basically the bottom before the bull market started. Why were you kind of looking at it then? Because I feel like although a few people got in then, like I think like Dylan Leclerc did, but it seemed that most people got in like later that year, kind of as things started to pick up, or even right in the top. Why? How come you were looking at it then?
For me, it was because I had time, because the whole country shut down, and I got put on furlough, which is the government scheme that rolled out that saved lots of jobs. So I had a lot of time on my hands, and I was like, what do I do with all
money?
Yeah, what do I do with all this time and the free money, which I now realize what it actually is, which we can get onto later down the line. Anyway, me and Jim, my co-host, we decided to start a podcast. We were like, okay, we're going to go on this journey, diving into what cryptocurrency is, and we want to take people on that journey, and we want to interview people and actually have a conversation and put it out there. So we started the Crypto Standard podcast, and it gained a lot of traction, and we were getting a lot of listeners, a lot of well-respected guests were coming on the show. And as we went on, it almost felt, it's a very strange feeling as you go deeper into cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. You slowly shift, or certainly we did anyway, we slowly shifted more towards Bitcoin and learning about Bitcoin. And the rest of everything that we were talking about kind of felt not as relevant, because we were interested in money and looking back at the whole picture of macroeconomics and what's happened in history with money. And Bitcoin kind of fitted that, whereas the other ones didn't so much, which we can also talk about why. So yeah, and then we moved on to the Bitcoin Collective. So we changed the name of the podcast to the Bitcoin Collective, and we really focused down on Bitcoin. We want to find out a lot more about Bitcoin. By this point, we were fully invested in Bitcoin. We'd moved away from all other cryptocurrencies. And then March 2022, we were on the podcast, and I remember this quite vividly. And it was, we were on the podcast and we were like, we always talk about America. America are doing this. America are doing that. It looks amazing over there with the adoption and maybe what's happening in Texas and Wyoming. And we were like, why is nothing happening here? So on that podcast, we were like, okay, why don't we run a conference? Why don't we run a conference in the UK and make a statement? And that's kind of where it snowballed from.
Wow. Were you guys just chatting on record on the podcast, or was it like with the guests and you just throwing questions out there?
Yeah. So it was on this episode. I can't remember what number it was, but it was just me and Jim chatting back and forward, and we were just like, okay, well, is this viable? Can we put on a conference? It started very small, the idea. So we were going to run it in our hometown in Dundee in Scotland, and maybe with 50 to 100 people, and keep it very small. And then it escalated very fast. So we put the call out to the likes, so people we'd had on the podcast before, so Jeff Booth, Greg Foss, Lawrence Lepard, Natalie Brunel, and James Lavish. These were the 5 that we went out to. And we said, we're thinking of running this conference. Would you, if we ran it, would you come over and speak? And all of them said yes. They just said, yeah, we will come over and we will help in any way possible. And that's when the snowball started.
It's so cool. It reminds me of, do you know Justin Welsh on LinkedIn at all?
No.
So he's like one of the leading he calls himself like a solopreneur, like he runs his own solo business. And so like his kind of method to launching a like product is that like he starts off like he just started off posting on LinkedIn. Then he got to about 10k followers, and he's like, okay, I'll start a newsletter, build more trust. And then so he built that up, and then once that's built up, he's like, okay, now I'll release the product. So he's kind of built up everything before, and it almost kind of seems like starting the podcast first is similar, because instead of being like, shit, let's just go out, start an event, we have to like get the speakers, all this, you started small, you just started a podcast. I mean, it wasn't even about Bitcoin initially only, it was just general crypto. You got the contacts, you got the speakers, you had listeners, you had an audience, and then you kind of pitched it to then the top, which is the speakers. And then you've still got this audience. You can then say, okay, we've got all these people you've been listening to this whole time. It kind of, I mean, is that something if someone wanted to do something similar, would you do it? Kind of, would you say do the kind of the same thing, or is there anything you would do different?
I mean, we didn't plan it this way. It was we never planned to put on a conference. That was never in our way of thinking. It just so happened that was the next stage or the next iteration of the Bitcoin Collective. We just kind of followed what we felt was right, and it ended up at a conference. So we started with the podcast, and then we were doing cryptocurrency. That didn't feel right. So we moved to Bitcoin, and then it just felt right to do the conference. And so there's not maybe a set way of doing it. But yeah, definitely by having a podcast first helped, because we had that audience, and we had the engaged audience who wanted to learn more. And if we could provide a physical space, especially coming out the back end of lockdowns, for people to come up and meet each other and actually be in an intimate space. A lot of people were were looking for that, because they've
Even
been
more so in
alone.
the UK,
Yeah,
as you say, because that kind of event it didn't exist before.
yeah, totally. Because it's a lot to ask. So the main event for Bitcoin is Bitcoin Miami, and it's a lot to ask for people of the UK to travel over to Miami to go to this conference. So that's why we made our conference, is to give something a little bit closer to home and raise adoption in the UK.
What were your biggest lessons from running that podcast as well? Because it's still going now, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what's the kind of like the biggest challenges and the things you've learned on that path? Because that's like 2 years, well, coming up to probably almost 3 years you've been running that now.
Yeah. It's been an amazing experience. And I love doing it. I look forward to recording every week. So we started out doing 2 days a week, which was ambitious.
That's
And
intense.
it was very intense and time consuming. But it was enjoyable whilst I had the time to do it. Because I was editing it all and putting it out on social media, and like that all takes time as well. A, a lot of the learnings from the podcast I just love talking to people and learning from other people, and I think that's what attracted people to our podcast, and hopefully yours as well. Just seeing other perspectives, and maybe my way of thinking is not always the correct way. I guess, is there a correct way of thinking? It's just opening your horizons and seeing different perspectives, which is what I love doing. And I never thought I'd be a podcaster ever. Like, I'm very introverted. So within big crowds, I will be maybe.
It's quite ironic.
Yeah, exactly. But put me behind a mic and a camera, I can do it. But put me in front of a crowd, well, 500 people, I did manage to do it, but I was pretty scared, to say the least.
You seem comfortable though. You wouldn't know it.
Yeah, so yeah, going back to the podcast, what I've learned is the power of podcasting really is the main thing, and it brings a community together, and from that community, the conference was born, which is the beautiful thing. So to anyone, a lot of people come to me asking, "Oh, I want to set up a podcast. Can you just help me with like how do I do it, or what equipment do I need?" I say just do it. Like, it doesn't matter. You don't need fancy equipment or anything like that. It's just the content that matters. We started out with no video, and it was just audio, and then you can build on it, and it's just slowly building on it, like you said at the start.
I mean, you could just record that on your phone, kind of thing. You don't really need anything else, do you?
Yeah.
It's powerful. It's interesting what you say about kind of the curiosity as well, because if you look at some of the biggest podcasts, I guess, I mean, well, one like Peter McCormack with What Bitcoin Did, he's so happy to act like he knows nothing and just kind of ask just the bare bones questions that most like listeners will want to hear. He doesn't mind, like he kind of lets go his ego and doesn't mind if he looks stupid per se. And then that kind of, I feel like that really engages the listener. And then also like, I'm always fascinated by like Lex Fridman as well, because like he'll have some like maybe really controversial speakers on, and like he'll talk to such a wide range, but he'll still find a way to like connect to them, be interested, even if like, I don't know, one person before would have had like the opposite views to this guy's. He won't kind of necessarily bring them up and push him or challenge him. He'll just kind of be like happy, sit there, be a sponge, and kind of learn from them.
Yeah, and that's like when you talk about, especially what Peter does, and that's kind of why we set out, because a lot of, and I absolutely love Peter McCormack's podcast. I listen to nearly every episode if I can keep up with it.
And there's a lot to keep up with.
There's a hell of a lot. Fair play to him.
I know, he's smashing them.
But it was bringing it down a level because a lot of the guests that he has on are Bitcoiners already, and they talk quite in depth on specific topics. So what we wanted to do was make it more relatable to the everyday person that maybe doesn't know as much about Bitcoin, or maybe why Bitcoin over any other cryptocurrency. And I think that's really important, is making it relatable to the everyday person, because that's how adoption grows, and how it goes more mainstream is just the education piece that needs to be done by everyone and on different levels as well, which is why Peter is so important. But we also need ones that people can relate to a little bit more.
That's cool. You kind of see that in your event as well, in terms of like you tried to keep the ticket price really low. You were like, bring a friend and you get a cheaper ticket, like someone who doesn't know about it. And it also felt like the event itself, although like anyone could get something from it because you obviously listen to these amazing people, it was cool how you structured it, because you could be someone who knows nothing. And I loved as well, there were loads of like girlfriends who'd been dragged along by their boyfriend, just kind of sitting there taking notes. And I was like, that's really cool. Like you're really like go into like the mass people basically, and trying to kind of lift them up to get on. So I guess like the Bitcoin knowledge ladder or something.
Yeah, 100. Like that's what we went in at, and it's a hard balance to find as well. Because I structured all the content that was on stage and who was on each panel. So I wanted to take people on a journey, is how I said, and take people starting with what is money, because you need to know what the problem is with our current monetary system before you can even contemplate talking about Bitcoin, because people aren't going to take a solution if they don't know that there's a problem yet. So identifying the problem, explaining the problem was so important, and not going in depth into things like the Lightning Network or Bitcoin Core was important to me, because that's not who we're trying to educate and inspire. We're trying to educate and inspire the everyday Joe and Jane on the street, who maybe don't know as much about Bitcoin and wants to just keep learning, or maybe start their journey going down the rabbit hole. So yeah, that's very important to me, because that's the way I see that the adoption of Bitcoin happens on a mass scale, is if we make it more accessible, inclusive, to people that don't know anything about it.
No, I think it's really, really, really important, because even like one of my, like if you look at a pitch deck or anything for an idea or a company, it always starts with what's the problem. Like you have to realize that there's something wrong / something there to be fixed to even want to look for a solution. And as soon as you're kind of looking for a solution, and if there is one, it becomes like a lot more easy. Out of curiosity, like the whole kind of the problem with the monetary system is so huge, but it feels like the majority of people have absolutely no idea of it. Because like I speak to a lot of people, and they're like, yeah, Bitcoin's cool, but like I think cryptos or blockchain's more than money, or like it can do more than money. I'm like, the money is like the biggest thing pretty much. Like that is one of the biggest problems faced. So like how do you kind of go about explaining to, I guess, your mass people that you're kind of targeting? How do you kind of give them like an overview or introduce them to this idea and try and get them to understand, I guess, the scale of the issue?
Yeah. It's not an easy thing to tackle.
No.
I mean, money makes the world go round is a common saying.
And most people hate money as well, so they don't even want to talk about it.
So they ignore it. And that's been the problem, I think, is people ignoring how the monetary system happens, or how the monetary system works, and relying on banks or financial institutions to do it for them. And I think now we're seeing like a revolution of monetary education, almost, of individuals having now to learn about money and take responsibility for that. And that's kind of what we're seeing with Bitcoin. And because to understand Bitcoin, as I said, you need to understand money, and at least a brief history of money. So the way I use the experts to explain all of this, which is why I put on conferences. But I've explained it so many times, and you need to come in at a different angle for different people, because everyone's different and they're interested in different things, and you can come at Bitcoin from a million different angles. If that is technology, if that is money, if that's environment, or whatever it is, investment, there's so many angles, and people aren't always interested in, like, I'm no techie, so I didn't come at it from a tech side. And if you try and talk to me about Bitcoin Core and coding, and going in depth into the Lightning Network, you'll lose me. Like, I know that's not the way that my brain works. So it's finding the way that people's brains work to spark their curiosity into Bitcoin. But going back to the monetary side of things, there's a common saying that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And why is this common? This is a normal saying in society at the moment. But why have we taken this as the norm? And that's kind of where I start. Is I put this question to people and ask, why do you think this is the norm? Because there's a huge wealth divide now and social divide, and it's like, that's where I would start. And then the conversation always moves back to, what's the core problem here? And the core problem is money, because money makes the world go round. So can we fix this problem? And that's when it snowballs into inflation and monetary manipulation. So yeah, it varies who you're talking to, is where I'm getting at.
It's a good answer. No, I completely agree, because as you say, you need a different tool for every single job, really. There's no point just getting a sledgehammer and using the same old thing. You do have to kind of figure out what, because also you'll lose people in the first sentence, as you say, if they don't actually care what you're talking about. So you do have to kind of curate it.
Yeah.
I want to kind of come back to then, okay, so you've done your podcast, you've asked these speakers, hey, want to do this event? Where do you go from there? Because, I mean, you've got to build up a team, you've got to book a venue, you've got to kind of organize, like, how the event flows. And so, I mean, how much of that did you do yourself? And, like, how did you also go about hiring people and kind of delegating jobs to them?
Yeah, it was, it all happened so fast. It's a bit of a blur. So yeah, we had
stress.
Lots of stress. That was stressful 5 months. But it was worth it in the end. So we had the idea in,
because also massive turnaround as well. What was it? March 2022, and then it was in October.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a lot of time.
So to put it even scarier, was the company, the Bitcoin Collective, wasn't actually formed until the 1st of June. So we couldn't actually begin operations until the 1st of June. And we couldn't begin paying people or paying venues. So it was
mad.
It was very stressful. We had from June to October. But yeah, so we had the idea, and we were looking at venues in Dundee, as I said, and then we managed to get these 5 speakers to come over, and I was like, okay, we're getting them to come to Scotland. I don't really want them to come to Dundee. I don't want that to be the representation of Scotland. It's not got the best reputation. So that's when we were like, okay, let's see what Edinburgh would be like. and we found the perfect venue, and just by luck, by chance, they had the dates that we wanted, and that the speakers could come over. So once we had the venue, we had 5 speakers. That's when we could get the ball rolling. And me, Jim, and 2 others, so Lucy Rose and Ria, started out. And then the team grew. So then we got Laura, and we got Krista, and we got Danny as well. So Danny actually, once we put the call out, he volunteered to come forward, and he said, "I'll build your website for you." And this was a huge thing that I had no clue what to do about the website. He was like, "Yeah, I want to help. I will build your website for free." And I was like, "Wow, this is the
so
power.
Cool.
The power of the Bitcoin community is it's just amazing to see." And I saw it unfold when we were building this out. So we had the team, we had the venue, and we had 5 speakers. Once we have those 5 speakers, that you can kind of go to other speakers and be like, okay, so Jeff Booth, Greg Foss, the 5 that I rattled off are coming. Would you like to come as well? We would love to have you there. And then it just kept getting yeses back. And it was just, yes, I'd love to be there. Yes, I'd love to be there. So we got up to 20 speakers, and that was a very fast period that we got to 20, and I was pretty scared.
I was like, a lot of speakers for a 2-day conference as well.
Yeah, I was like, oh wow, this is a lot of responsibility. And that's when my stress levels went from about here up to here, because I was like, okay, this is getting serious now. This is going to be a major, that's kind of the turning point of it being a major conference. And that's what we put in the title of what it was, the UK's first major Bitcoin conference. So that was the turning point for that. And in the end, we actually got 30 speakers.
Wow.
Which was wild. So yeah, the process of it all was amazing. It was very stressful. And one thing that we wanted to do was onboard merchants around the venue onto Bitcoin, so they could accept Bitcoin payments, because this was a big thing for me. We had Coin Corner as a payment sponsor, which meant that their Bolt cards were getting put in everyone's goodie bags. And I see this, especially for newbies, as a really good tool to show the utility of Bitcoin, that you can actually go into a shop and you can have a physical card and you can pay for a coffee or whatever it is with Bitcoin. And that kind of makes an aha moment for a lot of people. They're like, oh wow, it's not just a thing that you trade in your mum's basement with like screens in front of you, just watching it go up and down. It's like, I can actually use this in real life. So that was really important to me, to
it's
do
like a hands-on practical DT experiment or something.
Yeah, totally, man. So we spent a lot of time trying to onboard merchants. So I'd shout out to the guys at Bitcoin Walk. They helped us massively in trying to educate the surrounding area around Bitcoin and why they should be accepting Bitcoin payments. And also Matt from Coin Corner flew over from the Isle of Man, or I think he got the ferry over and drove up, and helped onboard merchants. But that was the tricky thing, is especially when the price is down, people don't really care about Bitcoin. And we were trying to teach about the fundamentals, but you're fighting, it feels like you're fighting a losing battle, because you've got Bitcoin sitting, or just dropped maybe 75%. And you're there trying to say like, no, like the fundamentals are solid. And they're like, yeah, whatever. So it's a very hard battle, but if we done that in a bull market and say Bitcoin was at $60,000, then it would be easy. You would be able to walk into a shop and be like, do you want to accept Bitcoin? They're like, oh, that thing that's going up in value? Yeah, I don't care about the fundamentals. I just want to look at the value that's going up. So that was a tricky thing, is to onboard merchants onto Bitcoin. And then finally, the last little bit of stress, I want to say, of forming this conference was the tickets. I had sleepless nights. So at the start, when we announced it, we had a flurry of ticket sales, and it was amazing. And I was like, "Oh wow, this is going to be plain sailing, and it's going to be easy." Nope, very different. So then, this is typical of events, and maybe because I don't have an events background, and some people on the team do, so that's why we hired Lucy Rose and Ria, because they've got backgrounds in events and doing this. But I don't have events background. I was just a podcaster, and I like talking about money, or the history of money. And we had this lull period for about, I want to say 2 months of not many ticket sales. And that was the most stressful period over it, over that whole planning stage, because you're looking at it and you're like, I've got the speakers, I've got the venue, and we just need to educate people around why they should be coming. So that was a very tricky period to get through. So we had a lot of marketing things that we were doing, which luckily worked very well. And we managed to bring the people in, and 3 weeks prior to the event, tickets just rocketed again. So we were lucky in that sense. But ticket sales are definitely a stressful thing when you're trying to put on an event.
So many things that I resonate with you there. I mean, like even the idea, like trying to do this in a bear market, it's not easy. Like it's like a double-edged sword. The people who come are genuinely curious, but to get people to listen, it's like you're trying to it's like you've got this naughty kid in school that you're friends with who like really smells, and you're trying to tell everyone, oh no, he's really sound, like come on, be friends with him. You just have to talk to him and he's a nice guy. Like don't listen to what everyone says, but everyone's like, nah, don't talk to him. And so yeah, it's weird. And I find that even like we've been like trying to reach out to a few people, like kind of sponsorship kind of stuff, and a lot of them are like, oh no, sorry, like our sponsorship budget for this year is 0, because they just don't really see the value in it, because most people just aren't kind of looking. So you say like when things turn around, like if, I mean, theoretically, like Bitcoin's going 100K kind of thing, trying to sell it then, yeah, would be an absolute breeze. But I guess that also kind of ties into like the best kind of, I guess, companies or things are made in a time like this. Because like in your position now, you've managed to do it in a deep bear market. Come the next bull run, like it'll be, as they say, it'll be not fully plain sailing, but almost plain sailing for you. And I'm sure you'll be able to scale things up a lot more.
Yeah, I think we'll have to change, like, so true, like what you're saying. And I think we'll just have to change the messaging quite a lot, because I think we'll get different people at future events. The beauty of this one was everyone cared about the fundamentals of Bitcoin and what Bitcoin actually stands for and why it was created. But say we were to have the conference in the peak of a bull market, then people are going to come because they see it's the value of Bitcoin's going up. And there's going to be a lot of different conversations within the attendees there. So it's about keeping the content around the fundamentals of Bitcoin and why it's actually here, and not talking about the price. I hate talking about price and everything like that. Like we kept that out of this conference for the majority of it, because it's irrelevant. because we are talking about fundamentals. So yeah, I think it'll just be managing the content going forward as the cycles go through, which I'm looking forward to. And there'll be a lot of people at future events that maybe don't know anything about what Bitcoin is, but they'll come in and be like, "Oh, I've made X amount of money because it's gone up X amount." So yeah, it's managing stuff like that is what I think about in the future. It's going to be
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I was in Lisbon for like it was about a year after I'd gotten into it. This was 2021, I think. And I was at like a little crypto gathering kind of thing.
yeah.
And like a lot of the conversations, people didn't really care about them. They were kind of just like, yeah, I bought Doge, like made loads of money. Always like, oh, you need to check out this little token, like it's going to moon next week. And so that was the kind of like the base of it. Because I guess that's, in a weird way, it's kind of why everyone comes in. Like, unless you're just randomly super interested in like the transition of money from like seashells to gold to cash, then you almost need that initial incentive to get you learning. So
Yep.
yeah, that's an interesting challenge. How did you go about, out of curiosity, getting sponsors? Was that kind of through your speakers? Like, how did you sell that to them? Given that, well, I guess you were still quite stressed about ticket sales. How many are you going to sell? How many people are going to be there? And also, I guess most people are kind of already in the Bitcoin space. There's not that many new people to kind of be like, oh, sign up to this exchange or something. How did you kind of go about that?
So this is where the podcast came in handy. Very much so. So we actually got a few of our sponsors through listeners from the podcast.
Nice.
So our big one, OKX, someone at OKX listened to our podcast, and shout out to him, Jack. He was just listening. He loved what we were doing. And he then heard that we were looking for sponsorship because we put it out in the podcast, and we just said, to pull this off, we need sponsors. So then he actually pitched it to OKX for us. And he said, I think these guys would be great to sponsor and get behind, which then started the ball rolling with that conversation. And as you know, they helped us
legend.
put this together. And like, I'm so grateful to him for listening and actually wanting to be a part of it. And then one of our other main sponsors was P1 Wealth Investment, and the CEO and founder of that, James Priday, he actually listened to the podcast as well. And he owns a financial advisory firm as well. And just so happens, like, we always we tend to slate financial advisors quite a lot, and talking not too highly of them but we understand that they can't advocate for Bitcoin and promote Bitcoin because it's not regulated. So that's why James contacted us, and he was like, it's interesting what you're saying about financial advisors. I want to give a point of view from a financial advisor. So he came on the podcast, and we had a great chat about it. And yeah, and then he was like, I want to get behind you and I want to help you. And with his business, he's a Bitcoiner, and he wants to help progress Bitcoin in the UK. So he was like, this is a perfect opportunity. So the two main sponsors actually came from the podcast, which is, I guess, an advantage of how we talked about at the start of why should you start a podcast. I didn't.
Out of curiosity, what was his? Sorry, you finish off first.
No, I was just going to say, I don't know. The beauty of podcasting, and also the strange thing is that you don't know who's listening. You never know who's listening. Like, we have thousands of people listen, but I have no idea, and I can't tell who they are unless they contact us. which is why I love when people reach out and say, hey, I've been listening to your podcast and it's really helped me here, it's really helped me there. Like someone this week reached out to me and he said, I've just bought my first piece of Bitcoin and I put it into cold storage. So just thank you for helping me on this journey over the past few months. And hearing those, like, it keeps you going as well, because it can be lonely, like just podcasting to a screen without getting any feedback.
That's so nice. Out of curiosity, what did James say as kind of the point of view from a financial advisor? What was his main, I guess, point?
It all came back to regulation, and from a financial advisory point of view, you can't recommend it. You can't advise on buying Bitcoin because it's not regulated. So in that sense, it's very difficult for a lot of financial advisors that maybe are Bitcoiners, because they can't tell their clients this is what you should, or this is maybe a path that you could look down. So yeah, I think it's very tricky from that sense.
That's difficult. They have to kind of write it on an envelope or something and kind of just slip it under slowly. And then be like, okay, actually 60-40, 60-40. Stocks and bonds. All right, I know we're running up on time slowly. So I just thought, what are kind of the main lessons you've learned from setting up this event? We've touched on the podcast a bit. What about this event? What would you kind of say to anyone who's looking to start their own as well?
If you're looking to start your own, wow. I would say just go and do it. Do the research. Make sure that you're passionate about what you're doing. Because the thing that kept me going, especially doing it in a bear market and like going through the ticket sales or the low ticket sales, I was passionate about what I was doing, which then kept me motivated through those times. So you have to be clear that this is what you want to do. Maybe don't go full out like we did and put on the largest in the UK, but start small and just keep building upon it. Is the best way to do it, I think. And that's what we're trying to do now, and we're moving to London on our next one. So it's just finding that starting point and just doing it. Just go and do it. Even if it's not perfect, just put it on and it will slowly grow if people are interested in it.
And you're passionate.
Yeah, exactly. You need to know that you're going to stick with it through the highs and through the lows. And yeah, so that's what I would say to anyone, really.
Nice. Great advice. All right. Thank you, Jordan. Oh, actually, wait, before you go. So one, where can people find you? And two as well, do you know when exactly your next event is going to be?
So you can find us at bitcoincollective.co.uk on our website, or any social media as well. Just put in Bitcoin Collective. And we are doing London for our next one. So at the moment, we haven't released the dates or the tickets yet. They will be coming very soon. We're just bringing on more sponsors. That's our main goal at the moment. And it's going to be bigger. It's going to be better than last year. But also, I've been conscious of keeping the atmosphere the same. Because this year the magical part was the intimacy with maybe the speakers and the exhibitors, all being close to each other and being able to socialize.
No VIP areas.
Exactly. And we're not having that again this year, because that's so important to me that Bitcoin doesn't have any VIPs. So why should our conferences have VIPs? The only reason that we would do it is to make more revenue. And I would rather sacrifice revenue and stick to the values of Bitcoin and stick to the values of Bitcoin Collective. So yeah, definitely no VIP tickets. So yeah, we will have more information coming out in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, as to dates and location. So I'm excited to release them and a few of the speakers as well.
Awesome. I can't wait. And I will definitely be there.
It'll be great to see you again.
All right. Thank you, Jordan. Cheers for hopping on the call.
Thank you.